And welcome everybody to episode 16. I am your host, Marcus. And in this episode, we are talking about all it takes is one habit. Yes, one habit. I know you've heard habit before. If you change a habit, it can essentially create a butterfly effect in your life. One thing I like to talk about a lot of different times is that there's always a gap. And to fill that gap, we're so worried about, we see the end results compared to where we are today. And we find that there is no possible way that that could be us. But not realizing that all it would take is a habit. Yeah, there's physical characteristics and stuff you can't really change, right? Yeah, you can go through surgery and stuff like that. But we're not going down that realm. We're talking about being all natural here. We're talking about making changes through habit. And, when you're looking at that gap, it can be really overwhelming to say the least, because of the fact that we don't realize that we have to take smaller steps. We need to chunk it down. We have a destination that we want to essentially arrive at, but how are you going to get there? You do that by small steps. You do that by starting with a single habit. Now, depending on whatever that goal is, there are many different things you can work on, right? I talk about soft skills. I talk about the different pillars and stuff like that, because the reason behind that is those are essentially building blocks, right? This is also why it's important to start in the mind. The mind is one of the most important things to start, and to realize the way you talk to yourself is ultimately what's going to lead to your demise or lead to your success. And being said, you need to not think that that can't be you. First of all, you can think that that can be you. And even, as much progress as I have made, I still struggle with that because my destination always changes, right? Once you reach a destination, your destination changes, right? You want to continuously improve. We all want to improve any way, shape, and form that we can. I want to be my optimal self before I pass, right? That's my ultimate goal. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I kind of know what that's going to look like in 5 years. But when I get to that 5-year mark, it's going to change a lot, and I'm going to get new perspective. I'm going to learn a bunch of new things, and then it will be projected into something else, right? It's just baby stepping it, but understanding that it takes one habit to get there. And you learn about time management, right? I talk about time management on this channel, and understanding that time management is important to know where your time is going, because there's a lot of different things that will drain your time, right? Maybe you have small kids at home, and that can be a big time drainer, right? But given, right, you have to dedicate that time to your kids, but saying you should still have at least some time to yourself where you can start incorporating a habit that can change your life. And for me, I remember when I talk about, one of the lowest parts of my life, it came much later. I've had many different low points in my life. I had many different changes that I've ignited in my life, but it really took a deep awakening, right? When I had, all those life events happen to me at once. And I had to start with one small habit. To start from essentially ground zero. How was I going to rebuild my mindset through habits? And one of the biggest things was just picking up the habit of reading more, right? That was one of the biggest ones that I had really done. I've read many different books, but I wasn't consistent enough to read, that 50 to 60 books a year. And thinking about that back then was like 50 or 60 books. That's just a lot of books. How am I going to do that? Again, I do use Audible to be able to do that, so I can speed up all the different books that I listen to, right, to obtain the knowledge, right? Because now day and age, everything is about speed. It's about speed and gaining knowledge, right? That's why I use it, because it helps me leverage my time. I've always been about leveraging your time, right? And time is one of the most precious things you don't get back. In my mind, right, it is important to read as well. I do read regular books on the Kindle as well. So I don't just do audiobooks. I do switch it up because it is important to be able to read as well. But being said, The audiobooks get me the knowledge fast, and that's what I liked about it. But going back, I had to build a knowledge base, right? I wanted to incorporate other changes in my life. It wasn't just to read, but it's to learn about other things like meditation, to how am I going to get healthier, right? Because I was going through a lot of health issues. What is the best diet for me, right? Because I was coming from a bodybuilding diet that was chicken broccoli. I mean, it was very plain and it was nasty. I always ate the same thing. I didn't enjoy what I was eating at all. It was strictly diet for physique, right? But being said, in doing that, I had to do something else, because even when I was on that diet, I still had high cholesterol, and that's what the current problem was that I was dealing with. Right, was heart issues at the time, and so I was researching as much as I could. I was like, okay, well, if I got to read 50 to 60 books, what that would be my first habit, right? So you start with a first habit is just reading to obtain the knowledge to try to reach your destination, right? My destination was to reach a healthier me in the optimal way, right? Because I didn't want to pass at a young age, right? I was still in my mid 30s, and I didn't want to pass at a young age, right? I'm at that age now where I have to be careful what I'm putting in my body, because it dramatically affects me. It does a lot more so than when I was at 25, right? So being said, what I had to do was obtain the knowledge. And so I spent a great deal of time trying to figure out what would actually work. And it wasn't just a diet, right? It was more like, what kind of lifestyle change can I make to change my diet, right? So first was just obtaining the knowledge, reading as many books as I can related to that, to try to hit that 50, 60 books. I didn't read 50 or 60 books on diet. I didn't, but I read a lot of good books. I think I might have read probably 10 to 12 books that essentially brought me on, along with a bunch of other research on top of that, that brought me to a plant-based diet. And so I incorporated that change. And then the next big one was, I was trying to figure out a way to invest my money better, right? Because ultimately, I was just like everybody else. I just had a 401k. I kind of just threw the money in there, and I didn't really care what happened to it, right? Like, as long as I was working hard, that money was just being stashed away, and that's where it was. But being said, I wanted to do more, right? I because of the perspective that the plant-based diet gave me, I started trying to not just accept things for face value, and try to figure out, well, what can I do to my finances to leverage me up, right? Because I saw how much my diet was leveraging my body. And even when I was bodybuilding, I didn't have that kind of leverage, even though I was in great shape. I was the strongest I've ever been in my life at that point when I was bodybuilding. But the thing is that I wasn't healthy, right? I still had heart issues at that time. So I switched to plant-based. I saw what it did, right? Just leveraging my diet and what it did and the dramatic changes it made. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't just be throwing my money in a 401k and all these other different accounts to essentially, help grow my wealth, right? Like, maybe I should actually dive deeper into it, learn about investing, and trying to do it myself. And so that's what I did. So I started investing more about different investments, and and finding out, like, what other things can I invest in right now. It's not saying I didn't invest in other things, right? I still invested in like random collectible stuff and stuff like that to help me, right? Because my father was one that always taught me to try to obtain other different collectibles, right? Because they hold value. But being said, and so looking at it, right, I took my finances essentially in my own hands, and I dived deep, and I started learning about stock market, and I started learning about trading, swing trading, and investing, and all these other different things, and realizing what you could do with leveraging, right? And realizing that a lot of times you have a middleman in there that is not really there for your benefit. And when it comes to finances, that middleman is essentially getting a good chunk of your money. And so I try to eliminate that, right? And not only that, so as you can see, I was started one habit into the next and rolling into the next, and allowing to build these habits. And the thing is you always look for motivation, right? But when you start doing this, okay, my one habit was to start reading more about the things that I wanted to improve in my life. So that one habit changed me, and it gave me new knowledge. And that new knowledge and perspective actually gave me motivation to go do it. Again, it all comes down to actually taking the action and doing it, right? But when I started taking the action to incorporate the diet, I didn't cold turkey it, right? Like, none of this stuff is just a night and day difference. It's gradual changes into the diet, gradual changes into the investment side of the house, and then gradual changes even with my soft skills, right? It was ultimately what it was. My communication skills was another big thing that I wanted to change in my life. I was always good with communicating when it came to the job, right? But when it came to other people in general, holding conversations and stuff like that, I started reading more about becoming a better conversationalist, right? And interacting with people better, right? I was always really good with people if it was a topic that I knew about, but if it wasn't anything I knew about, I kind of just let it be. But being said, I developed that side of it, right, in communications, and learned how to take it upon myself and how people interacted in body language. And I learned about all these different things, about unseen things that you don't typically point out unless you have perspective on, right? And again, this all just came from one habit of starting to read more to obtain knowledge, gaining that knowledge, being excited about the new things, the new opportunities, right? Because when you look at life is always, it's always very different because of the fact that you don't know the opportunity that is there until you actually obtain the knowledge. But if you don't know it's there, right, how do you know to obtain the knowledge? This is why I talk about, being curious, because if you are curious, then you go out and you seek other information. And when you go out and seek that information, you realize it unlocks doors that were right underneath your nose. And, when I came into plant-based, it was something I didn't want to do. I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. And it took me, I think, a month and a half to really debate it, and if this is something I was really going to do and how I would do it, and then slowly transition into it. And then finances was another thing, right? Am I going to live and die by my own sword and start taking my finances upon myself and making those changes, right? And communications and soft skills, right? That was another thing that I was like, I have to take it upon myself, right? I have to push outside my comfort zone and start building these things. And so, again, I didn't take it all on at once. I started with the diet. I did do finances not long after the diet. Once I started understanding what I should be changing, I started also changing the finances as far as investing and stuff as well on that side of the house at the same time. And then also looking at the communication skills, right? And trying to expand my soft skills, and realizing what I needed to be doing to help me progress my career. And doing these things and making these changes off of one simple habit of just reading more, making the small changes every day, and structuring your day to make sure that is a priority in your day. But it wasn't just that, right? Like, I started reading, and a good thing to even bring into here is, even before I even started doing the diet, the reading was a big thing, because I wanted to learn more about programming, right? Like, college had finished. I needed to learn more outside of work. So I needed to learn about new technologies. So that's ultimately where a lot of the reading started coming in, even before the diet stuff. And that, I remember picking up one book that just opened up my perspective about self-help and the changes that I could make for myself, which was absolutely amazing. And so, in saying that, when I was thinking about self-help, which is something I've heard about, but I didn't really understand all that was entailed into it. But going down that rabbit hole, it really opened my eyes about what was possible and the changes that I could make, aside from just going to the gym, right? Because I knew about, like, you can go to the gym, you can read books, you can develop yourself, but there's more to it, right? And this is where I came across meditating. I've always heard about meditating, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't really know a lot of people. I didn't take any classes or anything like that, but I started reading about it, understanding it better, understanding the benefits of it, and then incorporating it, right? Because, again, at this time, it was one of the lowest parts of my life. And so I was trying to understand, how can I control my mind and it is just extremely stressful. I don't feel like I had any time. I was trying to, I had two brand new babies at the house. I was going through divorce, so I was dealing with my dad. I was working a full-time job. I was still trying to learn on programming while up all throughout the night, right? And I was just extremely stressed, where I was having panic attacks, and I had to learn how to control my mind. I had to learn how to calm myself down and still be level-headed through everything. And so I knew that I had to do meditation. It was just something I had to do. I knew the benefits that were there, and it was free, right? All I had to do was sit with my thoughts, which is scary, but that's all I had to do. If I could just do that, right, things could get better. I would be able to control my thoughts, my ideas, stop the stress, right? Because stress was a big one that affects the heart. And do that and allow myself to take control of my life again, start implementing changes that I wanted to implement. And in starting to do this, again, it was so extremely hard to do meditation. I talk about it all the time because it's one of those things I know everybody says that they just can't do it. But it's establishing that habit of doing it, just allocating the time to do it, and just sitting there and making sure you set your alarm, you put it down. When the alarm goes off, I am done. Just sit there, do 5 minutes, right? And then every week I would add 5 minutes more. I built myself up to 20 minutes. And I remember, that in the beginning of the week, when you knock it up that 5 minutes, you go to 10 minutes, you're like, man, this is extremely long. But after the second day, right, it gets a little bit easier because a lot of times you find when you are doing the meditation that the first 10 minutes are really hard because you are just going through a lot of the events in your day, but not to get caught up in those events, but to just view them from a third person perspective and just let it go. And so in doing this, I was learning this through reading about mindfulness and learning about the benefits of it, and then actually implementing these things into my life and seeing how it was changing. Now, when I started doing it, yes, it was very hard because that first 10 minutes was just so hard. So the first couple of weeks, I wasn't understanding the benefit of it. But I was told, and what I was researching was the fact that you have to go a little bit more, right? Like you have to build that habit. Once the habit is established, your mind starts, rewiring itself and like cools down after that 10 minutes, right? And then you start getting in a more calmful state at that point. You are essentially being in the now, which is a lot of different meditations that I didn't even know about. And it's just, again, calming the mind and allowing yourself to think straight and keeping you in the moment, ready? Because ultimately all these tools and stuff, they put you back in the moment, right? To calm you down, to calm the nerves, to focus on what's going on, what really matters, right? The only thing that really does exist is right now, right? This very moment, not the future, not the past, right now, right? And that's what to focus on. And so, being said, the habits, right? Building out that first habit of just reading more and realizing, okay, well, I had to do, 50 to 60 books a year. So let's get started. What am I trying to incorporate? I'm trying to learn about programming is initially how I started. So I would read as many books as I could about programming and the different technologies. And then I went from that, picking up a programming book into self-development. And then I started reading about soft skills and how soft skills could help me in the workplace. And what a dramatic difference soft skills made in the workplace. Right? Because making the eye contact and just smiling, right, is something I always talk about and I reiterate on this on my channel and on the podcast, is because it makes a big difference, right? And repeating people's names, it makes a big difference, right? And being a good listener and trying to understand and be an effective communicator, right, is just listening and being really mindful of that. And I know even to this day, like I practice it as much as possible. And even sometimes I still catch myself like, okay, I need to be a better listener here, right? But ultimately being aware of that. And when you are aware of these things, you start making the changes and implementing these habits. Again, one small habit will build up. And once that habit of reading built up, Then I started building up to other things. Like I built the new habit of meditation, right? And started building that habit of meditation. Then I started, building other habits of going to the gym all the time, of eating healthier. But it wasn't, again, an overnight thing. It's a slow, progressive thing, realizing that I am trying to change my life, right? And that's not going to come in a bottle. That's not going to come in a book. Yes, I will have the knowledge and the framework from a book or wherever else I can get that knowledge from, or whatever resources I can get it from. But it's taking that knowledge and applying it to my life and seeing the dramatic changes, right? And coming from that spot, which I must admit, being at the lowest point of your life, you have, like nothing, you're coming from nothing. It is hard. It is hard to go day by day without, or looking past the day, but just focusing on what I needed to do, focusing on that one habit that I needed to build up to build everything else out. And then once that one habit became normal to the point where I didn't even have to think about it, I was just doing it, right? And realizing that every time I got in a car, I was turning on a book, that every time I went running, I was listening to a book, or, whenever I had spare time when I was cooking, right? When I was doing my diet, right? I'd listen to a book. And just getting in that habit, right? And then once that became the normal, then it was just focusing on, okay, well, what do I need to eat, right? Okay, I just need to make sure I have these things, right? And it wasn't just, okay, just eat and go 100% plant-based right now, right? It was, okay, let's take out all the meat. Let's go a week or two like this, just not have meat. And then the next week, it's like, okay, let's take out some more things that are dairy products, right? I wasn't a big egg person or a big cheese person. That really didn't bother me. Even a meat person, to be honest. There was a lot of processed stuff that had milk in it. So I was trying to slowly take that stuff out, realize what had milk in it, what didn't have milk in it, right? And then start weighing off of more of the processed stuff into the just all natural stuff. And so there was a long process there, but it was just, I'm just reiterating how to be gradual with it, right? Even like soft skills is another big one, is those things that I've been doing for the monthly challenges, right? And what's worked for me is to stand up, put your shoulders back, put your chin up, right? That's a big thing because of the fact that a lot of times you don't notice that you're slouching, especially because a lot of us are working in cubicles nowadays. And so when you are sitting at your desk, you're slouching, right? So stand up and keep your chin up, right? And that shows that you have more confidence in yourself. Actually start to feel like you have more confidence just by doing these things. And that's why it is something that I brought up in the challenge, in the monthly challenge last month. And then making eye contact, right? And challenge yourself, gamifying your life to where you are challenging yourself to incorporate new changes, right? And so these are habits that you build upon one another to change into the person that you want to become. And then every time, again, when you reach that initial destination, again, through obtaining knowledge through the different resources that you have a new destination. And so there's other habits you build upon that, upon new knowledge that you obtain throughout your journey. But ultimately understand that some habits or some things that come up, they may not suit you anymore, right? You perhaps learn a new perspective or a new way of doing things. And so you may drop old habits, create new ones that are more effective, right? Is ultimately what you're doing. So you're trying to build yourself out to the best of your ability. And to be able to do that, you have to be adjustable and creating those habits and reestablishing new habits and kind of just using them like, different accessories to yourself, right? To allow yourself to build yourself up. But in doing that, you can change your life, right? And this closes that gap, right? Because initially that gap between who you want to be and who you are today is big, right? We always have big dreams. And even like I said, when you reach that destination, right, you look to the next destination. And then a lot of times, like I still have another big gap because it's like I've created this new perspective, this new information that I've obtained, and now I have a new destination. And to get there is almost like another big gap, but I'm okay, right? Because I've built up the confidence through all these other habits to to realize that I can do it, right? I have a focal point to say, hey, I can make it to this new destination because I've just proved to myself that, hey, I've just already done it, right? Because I started with that one habit, I built upon that habit, I kept building up all these other habits, right? The 3 pillars that I talk about, I built those up into what has become my destination. Now I have 3 other pillars that I'm going to figure out on this other destination through my reading, my other resources, and start building on that, right? And continuing to do that. Now, one thing, I know a lot of times you can get stuck on the research part, and you're never going to know enough. I've talked about, the different pillars and the different things that I've done, right? When I talk about the plant-based diet, when I talk about investments, when I've talked about people skills, right? These particular things, I again had to build them out, but I wasn't just researching and then not doing anything, right? As soon as I learned about it, I tried to incorporate it in my everyday life, right? And so as soon as I learned about the smiling thing, right? Like I try to be aware every time I was around outside, right? Not just sitting, not just anytime I was out and about, right? Whether I was going shopping, I was looking, I try to be mindful of, okay, don't look at the ground, don't look up, right? Try to just look at people, smile, right? Say, how is your day going? Just random stuff, right? Random little things, and continuing to challenge myself. It's like a game. It's like going into the store. How many people can I say hi, good morning, and just be friendly, right? And so that makes a lot of people's day, right? Just doing that. And then that makes you feel better because you help somebody else and you make them smile, right? So that's ultimately what matters is by doing this. And this is how you, again, gradually get out of your comfort zone too, when you're building these habits, because you have to get out of your comfort zone to build new habits. But again, once you build that one habit, you can continue to build on it. But you have to, again, not just go in trying to obtain as much knowledge as possible, never executing. You should be executing as you're going along. Again, because you may read about it and then you may forget about it if you don't write it down, if you're not automatically turning around and trying to take some kind of action towards that, right? And this is where it's extremely important because you will forget, right? And you won't actually incorporate it in your life. And so it will just fall off. And then you wonder why a lot of the same cycles play over and over, right? Because the action isn't taken on the things that you're learning. And that is what is important. So again, obtaining knowledge is important and continuing education is important, but you shouldn't always get hung up there. You learn, and like I talked about before, right? Like you're going to have habits that suit you, but maybe you find a new way that suits you better. So you're going to drop habits. And so being said, you have to execute that new habit, whatever it is, to be able to incorporate that, normalize that into your life. And again, when you are building all these things into your life, you realize that it normalizes. So it's the new norm for you. And those things that you thought you couldn't be, right? You're living that everyday life now. And it's not even a second thought, right? Because we've tended to forget that we run on autopilot a good majority of the day. A lot of times you get in a car, you just drive and you get to the destination. You don't know how you even got there, but it was autopilot, right? If we had to actually sit and think about every little thing that we did, it would drive us insane, right? But the fact that we can put it on autopilot and then only when we really need to bring the consciousness to awareness, right? And when it was more deep critical thinking going on, that these habits are being sub-programmed into our brain, right, into our subconscious, and then we start doing them without thoughts. And again, because it can seem very overwhelming, again, with that gap and everything. So just realize that that first habit is you just got to make it sink in. And once it sinks in, you just start building off of that. Once you realize it's part of your normal everyday habit that you just do it without thinking about it, then that's when you move to the next one. That's when you progress to the next one. But again, you want to be not, again, implementing what you're learning at the same time. And you realize that one habit of just picking up more books than I didn't normally pick up, right? I never read self-help books. But just to see the effect that it's had throughout the years and the dramatic changes it's had. I've had massive promotions every year. Every year. I've started learning more about communications. My health is better than it's ever been. My finances, my investments are better than they've ever been. And that's what I want you guys to get at. That's what I want you guys to understand, what one small habit can change. That's all it takes.